Well, it may be the big game of the weekend, at least one of the big games. Number nine, Penn State hosting 19th ranked Illinois. Joining us now for the IlliniGuys.com football writer and analyst, Matt Stevens, who's going to be right there in the press box. And by the way, nobody gets the press box before Matt's. I mean, he's there before they put the popcorn out. That's how prepared he is. Matt joining us right now ahead of the game. Matt, good to see you. I was joking with the guys here in the commercial break that I'm not sure many people thought Illinois would be 4-0 and ranked 19th as they made the trip east to State College.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people at Penn State that weren't prepared for maybe to make this a second whiteout that apparently they're going to do now, a la James Franklin. I don't think the governor of Pennsylvania or the attorney general is going to be arresting anybody for potentially having a second whiteout in Happy Valley. And I think James Franklin can get these fans to dress however he wants every week. But I do think that Illinois' position in the national standing, position in how they've done in the last four games, and just the overall excitement of this game. Illinois is making its debut on NBC, Big Ten Saturday night on NBC, and I don't think that this is being taken lightly anywhere in the Smith Center in Champaign. I think that they know that this is a big game, and if Illinois can potentially get to 5-0, you start talking about even bigger things. Brett Bielema talks every week about how, the next game is always the biggest game. But for Illinois, it's kind of been that way ever since they played Kansas, is that in order to keep this thing going, you just have to keep winning and keep putting up quality performances. And so far, Illinois has done that. I think the momentum coming out of the Kansas game, which you guys know I talked about throughout May, June, July, and August, I think that you can't underestimate how this continues to go linearly up right now since that big win in Champaign in week 2.
Matt, I just want to make sure that we know Matt gets there first because he wants to be first in line to get the popcorn, not because it's before the popcorn's there. So just so we know.
He's just worried about me, you, and Ked taking it all.
There may not be any left, right? So no, Matt, I look at this matchup and I see a Penn State team, obviously extremely talented, very good team, a team that's been put in the playoff by many teams. And then I look at a team that still maybe isn't as dominant as maybe we thought they would be, even at this point in the season. And so I kind of look at it, what Illinois has done, and I think, Illinois kind of has a puncher's chance here.
I agree. I think if Illinois plays clean football like they have the first 4 weeks, Luke Altmaier has, I think, one turnover, and that's the fumble in Lincoln last week, but has no interception. So if they play clean football, they get some turnovers, and then they get some stops like they have the last 4 weeks on defense. They figured out in the fourth quarter against Nebraska how to run the football against a quality defensive front. Penn State has another quality defensive front of anybody in the league. So Illinois figures they can do that. I do think that everything matchup wise says Penn State, but I do think that if Illinois can make it a 4-quarter game, I've said this all week. I like Illinois' chances in that fourth quarter because they've just been proven throughout 4 weeks that if we make it a 4-quarter game, we're going to be better than you in the last 15 minutes. And I think that, one thing that people are underestimating here is that we still don't know how good Penn State is because I don't think they've played a quality opponent yet. I think West Virginia was about the most quality opponent that they've played on the road in Morgantown, but I think Illinois is better than them. So we've reached the quarter pole of the season, and I think we've got a lot of top 10 teams right now where we don't know how good they are or how average they are, and I think Penn State's in that category.
Matt, do you think the winner of this game is going to be the winner of Andy Kotelnicki versus Aaron Henry? And Andy right now is 1-0.
Andy's got Aaron's number. Yeah, I do. I think Aaron has looked forward to this more than any game, maybe other than the Kansas game, for obvious reasons. But he doesn't get to have the revenge game against Andy until he goes to Happy Valley. And I do think that Kotelnicki has unlocked some things with Drew Lock, the quarterback at Penn State, the former 5-star guy who I think is now back on NFL radar because of what he's done with him in these first 3 games at Penn State since being hired by James Franklin. And I do think that Illinois has a chance to potentially, with its way of playing defense, like they did last week against Dylan Raiola, a chance to give Illinois its biggest roadblock in a sense. I think they can throw things at Drew Aller that he hasn't seen all year. And I think Aaron Henry, look, Mike, we talked about this before the Kansas game. Aaron Henry watched the Kansas game over 100 times this offseason. He did it because he wanted to beat Kansas, but he also did it because he knew he was going to see Andy again in a different kind of connotation. And now it's at Kansas, at Penn State. So I do think that Illinois has a chance to, Aaron Henry has a chance to get some revenge. And I think we've seen throughout the first month of the year that Aaron Henry, second year defensive coordinator, is a much more mature and better play caller and just preparer of a football team than he was in game 2 of his career, of his defensive play calling career last year. And I think it's just going to be a completely different element when we go to Happy Valley on Saturday.
We were talking about, and again, talk with Matt Stevens, IlliniGuys.com football and writer, about the closing defensive efforts, both against Kansas and again, Nebraska. No points in the fourth quarter against Kansas, only 2 first downs, no points, only 9 yards allowed in the final 10:30 in overtime in Nebraska last week. All that suggested, to your point, Aaron Henry, a quick study, and the things he's doing on defense right now, it's a far cry from last year when, look, it was his first year in that role, learning some things, and it seems like he's taking those lessons to heart and applying them on the field.
Yeah, I would agree, Larry. I thought the halftime adjustment that Aaron Henry and, quite frankly, Brett Bielema made to put some more pressure on Dylan Raiola and try to dial up a little bit more heat on him in that second half, I felt like it was almost intentional. I felt like they wanted to get through the first 30 minutes, and they did. And okay, we're not totally blown out yet. And so let's give him a second look. Let's give this 19-year-old a second look. And they did that. And then they just came after him in overtime. I think you saw the most aggressive you've ever seen out of Aaron Henry in that overtime. And I mean, they scored in that overtime. And then Aaron Henry just said, Katie, bar the door. We're just going to go after this guy. And he's going to have to beat us with somebody in his face. I would imagine it'll be a similar game plan for Drew Aller because he can throw it from different platforms as well. But like anybody else, if he has somebody in his face, I think he's going to have some struggles. And he hasn't really seen that all year. West Virginia didn't get any pressure. And Bowling Green didn't get any pressure. And Kent State is, quite frankly, one of the worst teams in FBS. So he hasn't seen the kind of pressure and the kind of athletes that Illinois has on defense yet this season. And he has yet to, I say, exercise the demons of a lot of question marks about Drew Aller from last year when he was not exactly the 5-star guy that he was billed to be.
It also, Penn State last year really struggled with big plays. I mean, they
Sure
didn't
did.
get chunks. And this year, they've gotten those chunks. They've had some athletes, get down the field, whether it's receivers, running backs, breaking plays, and so forth. Do you think like that's a key? And I guess that's shown in this, for some reason, in this line here with Penn State being a 17.5-point favorite, which seems like really high. But I guess this has been why Penn State's better offensively is just the big plays. Is that the biggest difference?
I think it's a combination of that, Brad, and also I think since Saquon left Happy Valley, I don't think they've been able to consistently run the football the way they would like to and be a consistently balanced offense in the sense that when the opposing team knows that they have to run and maybe get 2 yards, they don't have to throw it, and I think they've been kind of that kind of a team where they're trying to be a little bit more cute because they can't get physical. I think this year, Andy Kolanecki, coming from Kansas, where they have been running the football and they do it in a lot of creative ways. They've been getting a lot of running backs and, especially the Singleton kid, a lot of touches in the backfield to help out Drew Aller. And I do think their offensive line is better. So I think that offensively, they've been able to be a little bit better because they can be more physical. But I also think, they're getting a lot more chunk plays because that is his calling. That is Andy's calling card coming all the way back from Whitewater, and then when he was at Kansas with Lance, and now he's doing it on his own with James Franklin. If Andy puts 30 plus on Illinois, I think you're going to start to see some people go, hey, maybe he can be a head coach really, really soon. And I think that there's not a whole lot of people that would look kind of cross-eyed at that because of the success he's been able to have calling plays.
If James Franklin has a nightmare about what could happen in this Saturday's game, aside from the nightmare of having to relive a 9 overtime loss again, what would that be for him? What would be the ultimate bad scenario for Penn State come Saturday night?
They can't run the ball, Illinois' defensive front, specifically T-Rod Edwards, who I thought played a phenomenal game on Friday night in Lincoln, is not allowing them to run the ball. They have to put it all on Drew Aller. He throws some picks, and Luke Altmaier is pitch perfect again. He doesn't have any turnovers. They play clean football. And at that point, you're kind of relying on Penn State's defense to save you. And I'm not entirely sure that James Franklin wants to put it on this defense because they are in the midst of a change between Manny Diaz and Tom Allen. And I think they need to score points in order to win, at least early on in this season. Even though Penn State's defense is very, very talented and it has some NFL guys on it, they have been vulnerable, especially early on in games. I would think an early lead by Illinois at that point where now Brett Bielema's team and Barry Lunny's just going to sit on you with the run game and physically pound you. And then, oh, by the way, at that point, Penn State's offense is not getting the ball enough, and they're not getting as many possessions as they probably wanted to have. At that point, I think that's the nightmare scenario for James Franklin, is that now the crowd's been taken out of it. Everybody's kind of subdued a little bit. I think you take the atmosphere out of it. Very, very similar to how Illinois started against Nebraska last week in Lincoln. I think that James Franklin would do anything he could to avoid that. I think the team that gets an early lead here on Saturday night is going to be in the driver's seat for trying to get a W.
Matt, want to get this in. We haven't talked much about the Illinois offense. Am I crazy, or has Illinois turned a corner since the first half of the Kansas game, where it was just a lot of run the ball 3 yards up the middle 3 times and, hope that one of them is for 4 yards, you get a first down and we move the chains. I was enthused, overjoyed, beside myself to see Illinois actually go downfield a little bit in the first quarter and actually throw some vertical passes. And to me, it seemed like it just changed the flow of the game. You couldn't now defensively just put 7 in the box and wait for, whatever running back is back there to hand the ball and you tackle him for 3 yards. It puts the pressure on the defense, and I think show that you've got some weapons, and it made it for a different ballgame. Is that me, or is that what you're seeing as well?
No, Larry, I think Barry Lunny wanted to get really, really vertical early on in his script. And I look, Larry, I think the game plan for this Illinois offense is actually a lot more simple than people make it out to be. I think they want to get really vertical and maybe throw it around a little bit more early on so that they can get physical late in the game and sit on people. And I think that's, if you want to call it throw to pass, or I'm sorry, throw to run, have your throw game open up your run game, maybe you want to call it that. I also think Illinois just got more physical in the fourth quarter than Nebraska was more capable of being. And I think you saw, Larry, I honestly think that some of those runs against Central Michigan and early on in the game against Nebraska that were going for 1 or 2, suddenly now you're giving the ball to Caden Fagan and they're going for 12 and for 20, because they're just tired of trying to tackle him and Josh McCray and for 4 quarters. I think that Illinois' motto, at least throughout this season, is going to be, you may be able to stop us for a quarter, you may be able to stop us for a half, but you're not going to be able to out physical us for 4 quarters. That's just the way that we win. But in the midst of that, we're going to build a lead because Luke Altmaier may be one of the better quarterbacks in the Big Ten. He has 2 outside receivers in Pat Bryant and Zachary Franklin, who are really, really solid and might be able to be playing on Sundays next year. And we're going to build a lead that way. And then when you're trying to basically get stops against us, we're going to play time of possession football, and we're going to limit the amount of offense that you're going to be able to play because we're going to still have the football because we're going to have 8-minute drives running the football with Caden Fagan and Josh McCray and Aiden Lawfrey and all of those tailbacks, even a Khalil Valentine, all of those tailbacks that Brett can go to. I really think that that's going to be the formula for how Illinois wins games, no matter who the opponent is. And I don't think Penn State is any different this weekend.
Yeah. Fun to watch. Number 19 versus number 9. We haven't even talked about Illinois, 16 of 16 in the red zone this year on that offense. So there we go. Matt, enjoy the game. We can't wait to see your reports on IlliniGuys.com. Appreciate you. We'll talk to you next week.
Not a problem, guys. Have a good one.
All right. Matt Stevens, once again, he's football writer and analyst for IlliniGuys.com. Big game. It's a 7:30 Eastern time kickoff on NBC, Illinois at Penn State. We've got much more to come. Talking about, okay, the NIL stuff with this quarterback at UNLV. Have you heard about this? We'll talk about it. That's up next.